This Memorial Day Monday, Rom Reddy of DOGESC sat down with Brian Sweeney of Regular Joe to discuss the state of affairs in South Carolina.
Hey, Grand Strand, this is Brian Sweeney with Rom Reddy and from DOGESC. And thank you for taking the time to visit. There are a whole lot of people up in North County that are very interested in not only the situation you've got down here with the lawsuit, which we don't want to focus on, but also with DOGESC, because that is a potentially game-changing effort. Now, with respect to the lawsuit, I know you've been to court and they're deliberating and what have you, but how long have you been down here? You're not a newbie from Ohio.
Oh, no, we've been down here since the 1990s. We originally had a place in Wild Dunes, and then we've been in this house since 2014 for the last decade or so.
Okay, and the basis of the lawsuit is that, I'll say, the government, which is whatever the current iteration of DHEC is since they split up, they don't like the fact that you put up a retaining wall to protect your property from the encroaching sea, to protect it from going over to Africa at some point.
That's what they say.
That's
not what I say.
Okay.
What I say is it's a fight for property rights, and whether or not we're going to let unelected agencies take control of our property, which is what they want to do. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but there is a state mandated jurisdiction line called a setback line. And historically, the state has had jurisdiction to the setback line to supposedly maintain the beaches and all that. It's been agreed to. Now, DHEC, with their partners, the Coastal Conservation League, but by the way, it's taken over DHEC. You may as well just call them CCL/DHEC.
Well, I do have a question about DHEC, but go ahead.
So what they want is, have you read a book called The Rising Seas?
No, I've not read
Okay, so this Rising Seas is a book that all the woke people read, which basically says all barrier islands should be evacuated. We shouldn't be living on barrier islands. Barrier islands belong to nature and belong to the public.
Does that include Martha's Vineyard?
that potentially includes Martha's Vineyard, although I don't know.
Okay.
You'll have to ask the Coastal Conservation League. But over here, their belief is that these have to be right. So now they come up with a new definition. They say if a storm comes in, I don't know, Hugo, they are going to walk down, it's not just beachfront, creek, marsh, any of these things, where they have critical lines, and they're going to say, I don't see any vegetation for, 2 blocks, so all of that is now critical area. And I said, critical area? Well, what does that mean? Oh, I can stop paying taxes? You're going to buy it? Oh, no. You keep paying taxes, you own it, but you can't do anything with it.
So it would be eminent domain without being paid.
Eminent domain without getting paid for it.
Not only not getting paid for it, but you have to pay your property taxes on a property you can't use.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And it's the Constitution of Founding Fathers died for this. I think George Washington said this. He said, property rights and freedom go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, which is why James Madison and all these guys, they put it into the Fifth Amendment, which says, private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. Right. It's as simple as that. It's one sentence, but that is no longer the case, because now they say they can take it and I'm standing in the way. They have never done this, by the way, this century. When we were on the stand, we asked their people, can you name one instance where you stepped behind a setback line and claimed property? Never done it. So I am their test case. I am standing in the breach. Once they get past me, this will be the greatest confiscation of private property this state has ever seen.
And what is the state doing with respect to the seawalls in downtown Charleston with all the colonial houses and Devereux, for example?
Oh, they're not doing anything. Not only that, Hilton Head in 2018, 5 homeowners got together and they said, this is crazy. They built a wall on their property now, inside the landward of the setback line, across 5 homes. DHEC approved it. They have no issues with it. They approved it, signed off on it, and then CCL sues DHEC saying, oh, you should have done something about it. So they went back and fined them $3,000 for not getting a land disturbance permit. Again, never claiming jurisdiction. And then there is a judicial pleading where DHEC actually says in that judicial pleading, we have no jurisdiction landward of the setback line. What were they doing in my trial? They were fighting tooth and nail not to admit it into evidence. They would not let it. They kept saying objection, 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 not relevant. They did not want to admit this kind of stuff into evidence.
Did it wind up in evidence?
We finally got it in.
Okay.
We finally got it in. But it was a struggle. We got it in on the last day. But I don't want to focus on these things because this is just a symptom of a bigger problem. And that's what DOGESC is all about. That's why DOGESC was formed.
And tell the listeners, the audience, about DOGESC.
So DOGESC in some ways has a similar philosophy to the Doge, the Elon's Doge, which is the reduction of the 4th branch of government, which is the unelected agency state, which is what the president is doing. But the president recognizes that you really can't get government off the backs of people or out of their pockets without it coming to the states. I mean, no one wakes up in the morning and says, oh, let me call the FDA and solve something, right? We're all dealing with state and local. And so that's the formation of DOGE, but then we have to take it a step further because we don't have a President Trump. We don't have a strong executive. And so we start with a very, very simple philosophy. It's on all our bumper stickers. It's on all our literature. That's our starting point. It says, we kneel to God, not government. So if you understand that, and then you understand that Marxism and communism want us to depend on government.
Oh, big time.
Our Constitution wants us to depend on God.
And let me interject something here because I want to draw a distinction. There's a certain South Carolina senator named Stephen Goldfinch who has used DOGESC as his ticket to the AG office, which I hope never happens. But he's sort of used that. You are the one that have the rights to it.
Not only we have the rights to it, but we have the trademark to it. All the names are registered to us. And it's actually, for those of you, I don't comment on all the senators and congressmen, there's so many of them, but anyone who uses that, it's illegal. It's illegal under state law. So hopefully
Senator Goldfinch stopped using it because it's taken and paid for.
And besides that, I just want to say, we don't endorse people. DOGESC doesn't. I'll tell you why we don't. Because DOGE believes in self-governance. Self-governance means anyone running for office, you need to make the case to the citizen why you are supportive of the citizen, why you believe that money and power needs to go back to the citizen. And we're not supportive. This is one place where we deviate a little bit from the president. We're not supportive of someone getting in and putting their thumb on the scale and telling people who to vote for, because DOGESC is all about self-governance. It's all about going back to what our founding fathers died for, which is citizens being able to make their own decisions, politicians recognizing that money and power has to go back to the citizen. And we got a big problem with that here in South Carolina.
But unlike with Elon, who has the support of the president,
We don't.
you don't have the support of the entrenched cabal bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it.
We don't.
So the job down here, I mean, Trump's plate is full, but the job down here is going to be different because we don't have the chief executive helping us. In fact, our chief executive is weaker than the chief executive in most states.
Well, yes. And
I didn't mean that as
that's
constitutionally that's.
No, that's true. That there are certain elements in the Constitution that keep this, the executive branch weaker. But I tell you what, I've been looking into this, and I would say about 50-60% of the weakness is because the chief executives behave weak. They are weak. They have some certain powers here, which honestly, even Trump doesn't have. One is they have line item veto. They can veto the whole bill, but then these people are so weak, they can't sustain a veto. They have no idea. They have no support. They sit in their office with their little designer kerchief. Some bill comes to them, and they say, "Oh, what is this? Oh, sign it. Oh, yeah, I got to go cut a ribbon somewhere else." So I think we've become that way, and I think if we get into talking about some of the things that need to happen,
Yes.
this is an area we have to fix, and we have some thoughts there. So I'm happy to share.
Well, we have a super Republican, I'll use that word in quotes, super Republican House and Senate. And that they both have override capacity, I believe.
They do.
They do.
But here's how it is supposed to work, Brian. I think if you have leadership, it's a word we don't use very often here in the state. I ran private businesses my whole life. I built private businesses my whole life. And as a matter of fact, at one point in time, when we buy a company, I actually used to conduct a class in leadership. What are the traits of good leaders? So if you have good leadership, what you can do is the executive can develop. You don't need that much. You need 30 or 35 votes in the House and 15 votes in the Senate. Either one or both is great, but either one to sustain a veto. Yeah. Then you come into me, you're the powerful legislature. You got some powerful ones over there in Horry County. So you're the powerful legislature, right? You come into me and you say, well, I'm not going to do this, I know you ran on this, but I'm not going to do this. And say, okay, shut the door. We're not going to work this on TV. We're not going to work this on social media. But let me tell you something. I have a stamp in my desk, and it says dead on arrival. Anything that has your name on it, it'll be stamped dead on arrival, and I have the ability to sustain that veto. So you can do that if you like, or we can work together if you like. It's your choice.
The art of the deal.
The art of the, this is what we need to be doing. We need to be using power, and we just assume we don't have the power. So that's one thing. But the second thing in the executive branch that's a big problem, I think it's unconstitutional, but what do I know? As a matter of fact, DOGESC has retained a constitutional attorney to actually look into some of these things. These agencies y'all are talking about, prior to getting on camera, we're talking about the split and DHEC and health and all that. These agencies are controlled by the legislature. They control it through these boards and these commissions and all these type of things. And I'm like, wait a second. You're the CEO of the executive branch? And some guy's walking in and controlling all these people? So if I'm running a company and I'm the CEO, and I got some other guy coming in and telling my people what to do, well, I wouldn't last more than a day.
But some of the agencies, as you indicated earlier, are controlled by outside 501c3s who might, I'm saying this, not Rom Reddy, but some of those I would question whether or not they really deserve a 501c3 status, because they're suing everybody left, right, and center, and there are limitations on that for a 501c3. But some of the agencies aren't even controlled by the agency people, they're controlled by outside forces.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because this is back to the same question, the big L word, leadership. So if you're a CEO running a company, and Brian, let's say you are the vice president of marketing, and you don't take direction from me. You listen to 10 other people. So now you leave yourself open to being controlled by anyone. That's what's happening here. These people, no one's in charge. No one's in charge. And I think Article 4 of the South Carolina Constitution says something important. I don't know if your listeners actually know this. It says, the governor is the supreme executive authority. These are words from the South Carolina Constitution. The governor is the supreme executive authority of the state. I'm like, act like it.
And I'll also point out there's a difference between control and influence.
Yeah.
So he might not be able to order something be done, but like you say, you can have a private conversation. and say,
Absolutely, absolutely. You can absolutely lead. We are not leading. And now that also ties into what's happening with the legislature. You look at what's happening in the general. There's all these splits and these divisions and these caucuses, and everyone's arguing with everyone else, and they got the rhinos and the non-rhinos and all this kind of stuff. Why? There's no leadership. Look at what would happen. They just passed a bill at the federal level, Trump's big, beautiful bill.
B3.
Yeah, right? 215 to 214. You think that would have happened without Trump leading?
Not at all.
Not at all. No chance.
And he still had, what, 2 holdouts?
We still had a couple of holdouts, right? Yeah. So you got, so right now that's the case. So here's the issue. If you're in office and you are balking at an agenda that someone ran on, it's very simple. If you're a strong leader, you say, listen, you're going to get on board, or you really think you're going to get through that primary?
You mentioned that word, primary.
Yeah, I did.
And I want to focus on that a little bit because so many people in South Carolina do not realize that election day is not in November, it's in June.
100%.
With the Republican primary, because the state is overwhelmingly Republican. There are certain Democratic holdouts, but and those folks, by the way, are just as corrupt as the Republicans. But the Republican primary here is what dictates who's going to
It does.
be in the legislature for most of the states.
Yep, it does, and that's why I think it's so important. Again, I don't know if you know this, but even in big election years, we have a population of 5.5 million people, something like that. Mm-hmm. Do you know how many people vote in a primary? That determines the future of the state, like you said.
I know how many voted in the local primary, not in February for the president, but in June, and that was less than 8%.
So statewide, and it's funny, it doesn't really vary, even if it's a presidential or not. It's somewhere between 360,000 and 400,000 people. Mm-hmm. So 360 to 400,000 people, like you said, voting in the primary determines the future of the 5 million people. So that's the way it works. And that's why you're able to have powerful influences stay there. Yep. Because that's all they worry about. They worry about these 360,000 people. As long as they keep them happy, that's good. And again, there's Brian, this is another thing. I would love to see people running for statewide office who get away from this terrible system South Carolina has of taking gobs of money. Gobs of money. Once you take money, you're compromised. Yes. You just are. I used to, in almost every company we ran, and we actually we had some international companies as well.
Were they all private or public, by the way?
They're all private. It's all our money. Uh-huh. Okay. It's all our people, our shareholders. We always made sure our people were successful when we were successful. But there was one sentence that was and we translated it depending on if it was outside the country. It simply said, when in doubt, take the path of highest integrity. That was our driving motto. And I'll tell you the story, and sometimes you got to live it, because we bought a company that had a pretty massive operation on the West Coast, and this guy was, let's call him Tom. Tom was running that entire West Coast. And almost in the first month after buying it, I noticed he rigged his expense account. So I gave him a chance to fix it. I said, what is that all about? I gave him like 10 minutes to try to, and he kept doubling down on rigging it. So I said, you're fired. He said, you can't fire me. I said, I just did. You're fired. I said, when I say when in doubt, take the path of highest integrity, I don't say this to put up a banner and say, look at how great we are. And, my dad used to tell me, he says, integrity is a kind of a tough thing, but he simplified it for me. He says, integrity is what you do when you think no one is looking.
Do you have any spare time to look at some campaign reports, by the way?
You know, like by the way, I want to say something about that. You will see DOGESC does not get into attacking people personally. We just stay away from that. I think a lot of what's broken is our systems are broken, and the system breeds corruption.
Yep.
And if we fix the system, hopefully we fix this. And I really believe, you know, before we got on camera, you and I were talking about it. You know, I don't go around talking about religion all the time, but I'm very spiritual, and I do believe that we're all made in the image of God, and we have more in common than we have that divides us. And in America, we can have differences. You can disagree with me, it's okay. It doesn't make me a bad person that requires you to go on and personally attack me and tear me down when you probably never even met me. You know, and I think that's destructive to this country, and we just need to be able to say, we can disagree, we can have different opinions, we can still be friends, that's okay. And what this destruction, this personal destruction is doing, Brian, is people today are afraid to say in public what they talk about at the dinner table. And that's a sad state, because I've had people here say, no, I can't come out and say that because I'll get attacked on social media. I'll get in the press, and you know, you got a left-leaning press that calls you names no matter what. But this,
if I'm not attacked on social media, I'm having a bad day.
fine. That's what it is. But you can't suppress dissent. You know, Dr. Ben Carson is much smarter than I'll ever be. He said something profound, and you know, it drives my thinking sometimes when I talk about these things. He said, we cannot be the land of the free if we're not the home of the brave.
Couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
But let me talk to you about candidates, and I know you're not endorsing any candidate, that's fine, but because of the circumstances we have, in order to be a candidate for any kind of local office,
Statewide?
or statewide,
Yeah.
or House or Senate,
Yeah.
you have to be in a situation where, from a family perspective, you can do that.
Yeah.
You don't have little kids running around the house.
Yeah.
You're doing sufficiently well off financially so that you can spend some time in Columbia and get paid whatever for it, which I'll grant you is they're underpaid. Some of them don't work at all, but they're underpaid. And that sort of says you have to be either, a lawyer who's making enough money or has a law firm that can handle the stuff while he or she's in Columbia, or you have to have your kids out of the house, or you have to be sufficiently wealthy in order to run the campaign and to spend some time in Columbia and back and forth and the whole commute thing. So that kind of narrows your field, I think. Can you think of any way to try to expand that?
Well, but when you come to these things, Brian, you know what? Our founding fathers were a lot smarter than we are. Like they're just if you go back and read some of the stuff and how they came up with the Constitution and Declaration of Independence and how they were prepared to sacrifice, they are a lot smarter than we are. What they envisioned is not what we have. Mm-hmm. What they envisioned is, you have to ask yourself, why do you have House elections every 2 years? What they envisioned is you and I taking some time out of our lives, going out and serving your state or your local community or your country for 2 years, and then going back to being doctor, lawyer, and housewife. What they did not envision is what we have, which is politicians as a career. Mm-hmm. They didn't want that. They didn't want that. Now we have entrenched politicians, and I get it. I get the narrative and that you just brought up, which is, I'm an entrenched politician and I can't live on $15,000 a year. Well, you were not supposed to be an entrenched politician. You were supposed to go serve your state or your country for 2 years, maybe 4 at the most, and then go back to being whatever you were.
Yep.
And so this is what I mean. We've gotten away from the founding principles of this country, and now we're trying to shoehorn something and say, oh, no, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pay you $100,000 a year so you can be a career politician. So,
Well, and we've got enough of them. Some of them actually died in office, but we have a limited pool of people
yeah,
that would even consider running for office because of their financial or family circumstances. I would love to be able to expand that, particularly to get some of the younger folks involved.
but it shouldn't be that way, Brian. I mean, that's what I mean. You take let's start at the top. Take the governor's race, okay? The governor's race today is I don't know, $8 million race in a small state like this for 5 million people. So what happens in an $8 million race? Not a lot of people have $8 million they're going to go write a check for, right? So they got to raise money.
Mm-hmm.
So then think about what happens. I'm not going to name names because, like I said before, I don't name people. That's not my thing. But this is a true story. There was a governor's race, and one very wealthy patron set up 20 LLCs. They donated money from 20 different LLCs to get around all these campaign limits.
Yes.
Then when you look into it, 4 of those LLCs are actually defunct. They're no longer active, but they still donated the money.
Yes.
So when you set up this system, the system is broken and the system is not transparent, and it should not take this much to serve your state. And that's the source of corruption.
It certainly is, and leaving names out of it, but trial lawyers who are now called the Justice League or Justice PAC or whatever, they have Justice PAC number 1 through 27 or whatever, and each one can kick in $1,000.
Yeah.
Depending upon the risk.
Correct.
You've got tourism ones do the same thing, and they have LLCs all over the place. So Total Wine does the same thing. You have Total Wine of Utah contributing to campaign races in South Carolina. It's rigged and totally legal at the same time.
So let's talk about this judicial side you brought up. Let's talk a little bit about judicial side and what we can and cannot do about it. So again, I don't know if your viewers know this, but South Carolina is one of only 2 states in the nation, only 1 of 2, or Virginia being the other one, where all the judges are appointed by the General Assembly. Okay? All the judges from Supreme Court on down. You say, okay, I get that, but then they're reappointed, and they're reappointed, and they're reappointed by the same people, and they have this JMSC, this commission that actually vets these people, and the JMSC is it's all insidious. So you have these judges now beholden to the legislature. Essentially, the judicial system become, in my lingo, private sector lingo, becomes a division of the legislature.
Well, sure, because
that's all it is.
Whatever the number is
That's
of the House is for the legislators, and they have to argue cases occasionally in front of the judges.
It's in front of the same judges, so the whole thing's corrupt. So what DOGESC is doing, and everything we're doing, one thing DOGESC does, and I sometimes keep our people in line on this issue, we all can complain, yeah, everyone can complain. Complaining is easy, doing something about it is harder. So we actually are developing proposals for the judicial system in 2 places. I think step 1 is there's some things we can do just through changing the law. The legislature can actually change it. And then step 2 is we actually need a constitutional amendment. So let me start on the final one and come back. If we get a constitutional amendment, which we are going to, DOGE is going to actually table this for the next session, this is what would be an ideal situation, similar to some of the other states, including Florida. The governor, who's appointed in a statewide race, would appoint the judges for a period of 3 years. That's it. At the end of the 3 years, if you are appointed for 3 years, you're the judge, you will face a retention election. But the public votes on whether you get reappointed. They don't vote for a bunch of other people. They just vote yes or no for Brian. Brian's been doing a good job. He's been citizen friendly in what he's done. He's been fair in what he's done. He deserves another term, yes. Otherwise, he's doing a terrible job, no. Let's say you vote no, goes back to the governor who reappoints someone. It's called a retention election. And I think it puts the power back to the people, which is everything Doge does, there's a litmus test. The litmus test is, does it transfer money back to the people, or does it transfer power back to the people? Both of those, the answer is no, we won't support it. We're out. We won't do it.
And you say judicial system, that's fine, but I don't know how familiar you are with the family courts here, but they're just
Oh my gosh, they're horrible. They're horrible. They're just, what we're doing in these family courts is, I don't know, I would say it's criminal.
Yes, I think some of the
I
judges.
think I really do think it's criminal. It's just terrible what we're doing, and you know, we're destroying the citizen. That's what we're doing. We're destroying the citizen. This country was founded with a self-governing citizen, and we are destroying the citizen. And it has to stop. I'm going to say something that your listeners are thinking, maybe this guy's being too dramatic. First of all, let me say, I'm not dramatic. I'm not a dramatic guy. If anything at all, I stay calm. My wife gets upset with me because she says, why aren't you upset about this? I think we're on a collision course right now between freedom and tyranny. That's where we are. We're on a collision course. Freedom and tyranny are now headed for a collision. So the question for your listeners, your viewers, for you, for me is this a battle we're going to take care of? Or is this a battle we're just going to kick the football down and let our children take care of? It's going to happen.
Yes.
So the question is, do we have the courage? Do we have the will? Do we have the commitment that our founding fathers had to say, we're going to fix this problem? Or are we saying, yeah, we're just going to talk about it, we're going to complain about it, and we'll form a commission, let's study it, and then after we study it, we'll just kick the football down and let our kids deal with it. We have to take care of this now, Brian. This is why I said this whole DOGESC thing is like the second American Revolution. If it's not grassroots, if it's not people just bubbling up saying enough, we're going to fix it top down.
But that brings up a point though. What is the structure like? Do you have offices in various parts of, or representatives or associates in parts of the state that locals can contact?
This is a great question. We actually have a field organization now. We have a guy in the upstate, guy in the middle part, guy in the low country. We have someone kind of monitoring all of this stuff, and their goal is to really develop a volunteer organization throughout the state. They're signing up people. You need to go to dogesc.com and just sign up. Someone will be in touch with you. And I sort of bring the private sector mentality. I'll say, I don't care if someone donates $10. I want you to get in touch with them and thank them within 24 to 48 hours. And if someone signs up, I want you to make contact with them within 24 to 48 hours. And we're going to develop this thing. But I'll tell you something's going on out there in the state because, well, maybe we didn't set the goal high enough. That'd be my problem. We said by the end of the year, we would need 5,000 volunteers throughout the state. We're at 5,000 now. People are coming out of the woodwork. People are like fed up. This is enough. I think they're answering the question we asked earlier. Are we going to handle this problem? Do we have the courage to do it? Or are we going to kick it down the road?
But what would these people actually do?
So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to happen this fall. So I don't know how much time you got, but I'm just going to list a few things. Okay, I'm going to list a few things that are going on. The first thing we talked about is we're going to table the legislative part of judicial reform. So when we table the legislative part of judicial reform, we want this volunteer group to call, to write letters, to do op-eds, to call all of these legislators constantly, like from wherever they're here, say, this needs to pass. We're not going to hang it up in some committee somewhere, which is the famous thing. It was like all these committees they have.
Judicial.
Yeah, I call it the Roach Motel. Stuff checks in but doesn't check out.
That's totally.
Yeah, exactly. It checks in but doesn't check out. I'm like, stop this madness. These people are going to be harassing you until you get this through. So that's one thing that's happening. The second is, I'm going to borrow some of 47's language here. We're developing a big, beautiful bill for education. We're going to have 3 or 4 things in education in one bill, so we can't hang it up in different places. What we're doing in education to our children is a disgrace.
Big time.
42 out of 50 in K-12 education. How do you do this, Brian? Go say, hey, Tommy, go to school, work hard, do your homework, don't worry, you'll finish 42 out of 50. We're condemning our children to a lifetime of poverty. And we are poor. Don't make a mistake. The money is with the government. We're the highest tax red state in the nation.
Yes.
In income tax. This is not counting all your sales tax, your property tax, your gas tax, your other taxes. We're the highest tax red state, and we are number 8 from the bottom in median family income. We're a bottom 10 state in median family. So the people, a citizen is poor, the government is rich.
Yes.
And what are we doing with this richness? Are we doing a great job with education? Disastrous. So we're going to have this thing. I actually used a group that does some nationwide stuff. I said, pick the best in the nation and come to me with what this means. And one of the things we're doing, Brian, is you might find this fascinating. Viewers might find it fascinating. We're actually going to run a trial of this in Edgefield County this fall. It's using AI for math, English, and science. And you can say, what is using AI for math, English, and science? Well, it means that you and I learn differently. That's a good thing. My left side of the brain different from your left side. So we learn differently. And so the kids learn differently. And so what AI does is it loads the syllabus in this computer. And when the kids are working on it, it figures out you're learning differently than I am. And it adjusts the teaching to your learning. I watched this in action. I have a charitable foundation that does work actually in the U.S. and around the world on child trafficking, which is just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And
topic for another day, but yes.
It's horrible. And also in education. And we use this AI-based learning, transformational. I said, if you get a 15% improvement versus a baseline, I'll fund the second year. We're seeing between 32 and 38%. It's transformational. These kids are fascinating. I was watching one thing on AI. This is something called read along.
Randy Weingarten's going to love you.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing too. Read along is so great. If you're having trouble pronouncing words, let's say that's your issue, you read it, and then it underlines the word you're pronouncing wrong, helps you pronounce it, and when you do it, it gives you a star, and the star goes into the smart panel in front of the class. And everyone's like, hey, look at Brian, he got that, he got a star. You got 3 stars, I got 2 stars. These kids are so engaged, they just start accelerating their learning.
Teachers' unions are going to go for your throat.
Oh, they are. And, look, this is the thing that I always say, when we buy, a lot of times we buy companies that don't perform. I cannot focus on all the things that can go wrong. Because if you focus on it and all the things that people are getting away, then your best option is do nothing. Just stay still.
Speak about doing nothing. Do you think the Supreme Court in South Carolina is going to approve the voucher bill? The one they didn't approve.
I don't know what they're going to do or not. I know it's a sensitive issue. My question, though, and I wish we can answer this question, because we need to answer questions like this. And this is my private sector brain thinking. Henry McMaster talks, he's very proud of his achievement. He spent a lot of time on his State of the State talking about it. As a matter of fact, that he's moved up teacher salaries by 50%, I think, in some period of time. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with saying teachers are hardworking. My mother-in-law was a teacher. My sister-in-law is a teacher. And I don't have a problem moving up teacher salaries. But my question is this. I look at education through the kids' eyes. Right? That's the outcome. What's the outcome? Are we changing the outcome? Are we going from 42 to 35 as a result of that? So this is another question I asked one of the legislators who was here. I I actually asked them two questions. I'll tell you the second one in a minute, which is, again, bothers me a lot. The first question I said is they were talking about this program, the voucher program. I said, what percent of people, the way you've structured this program with limits on this and something on that and something else on this, what percent of the people are likely to actually use this program? Assuming they all use this program, are we going to move from 42 to 39 or 42 to 41? They have no idea. So we got to stop this thing of focusing on programs and focus on outcomes. What is the outcome I'm seeking? And I was talking, I'm hiring this guy, by the way, fantastic guy, works in Governor Glenn Youngkin's office in Virginia. He's a deputy director in Youngkin's office. He's going to start with us on July 20th and run a lot of the AI stuff we're doing, which we haven't even touched on. I simply said, my goal is simple. Everything we're going to put in this big, beautiful bill needs to move us from 42 as a first step to the 20s. If it doesn't, I don't want it in there. I don't care how good it is. I don't want it in there. I want outcome-based things that we focus on. Why? Because that is what the children want. That, you have to look at it through the children's eyes, not through our eyes. Because when you start looking at it through our eyes, you start going down these ideological rat holes. Mm-hmm. When you start looking at the children's eyes, you start looking at it on outcomes. And one other thing I asked this senator, I said, let me ask you a question. I said, y'all talk about how y'all are paralyzed. You talked about teachers. I said, how about this as a uniting factor? I'm driving in an I-26, so whatever. I'm driving to South Carolina. How about a big, beautiful green sign as I enter South Carolina that says, the penalties for crimes against children in the state is death. Welcome to South Carolina. What's wrong with that?
No, nothing.
Why can't we do it?
I put it in neon.
Yeah, until a few years ago, the penalties for trafficking an 11-year-old girl was $200. Is this how we're going to protect the most vulnerable in our society? It makes me sick. Our foundation does work all around the world in this. This is a sickness, and we tolerate it when we shouldn't. Children, crimes against children in this state, we should lead the way in saying it's death is the penalty. And I'll tell you something, I don't judge people. You want to go drink, you drink, you're an adult. You want to gamble, you gamble. I'm not going to judge what you do or don't do. That's not for me to say, because again, I go back to self-governance being key. But I'll tell you one thing. There is this casino thing going on, mm-hmm. that they want to do in I-26, I-95. A lot of these legislatures are talking about improvements and all that. I have done work around the world. I'll tell you what's going to happen there. That is going to become the grand central for child trafficking. And I don't care about the moral aspects of gambling or not, but I'll be damned if we are lost our moral compass, that we are prepared to say it's going to cause development, it's going to make money, it's going to put money in people's pockets on the backs of children.
I would love to pursue that in a separate conversation, and I don't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. Yeah, that's a whole different topic.
But, well, it is. But do you believe the legislators who tell you that we're just going to do this for the impoverished counties on I-95?
Oh, no.
Or would they possibly set one up in the current head or capital of child trafficking, like Myrtle Beach?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. This is what we got to look into. But there's, Brian, I always say, do not reinvent the wheel. History is a great teacher. So I have history from a lot of different places because of my foundation does work in this area. But go to North Carolina. The same people, by the way, the same people. They just opened this thing in North Carolina. Go check it out before you decide that it's going to do something for counties or whatever, and at what cost.
They're going to put it on I-95 in the impoverished counties. That's just for the impoverished counties, Nate.
Yeah.
That was sarcasm, folks.
Yeah.
For you and Rio Linda. Yeah, but I'd love to have another conversation on that one because that's
Yeah,
a real
that's-
tough,
that's
tough
a-
subject, and I know a lot of people who are working to try to deal with that whole disgusting issue. But you know, I want to. I want you to tell the listeners again, how can they help? Now, you mentioned the website. I know you got, do you have a Facebook page? Do you
Oh,
have
yeah.
a
We have
social or
we have of course, we have a website, DOGESC.com. We're on X, at DOGESC. We're on Instagram. I think there we're Doge, South Carolina. We're on Facebook, DOGESC. A lot of these are very current. They're up to date. It tells you what's going on. There's always, and we don't restrict comments. There's always the comments of the people who say, want to play the class war. You're rich. You're something else. I don't do any of that. I think my recommendation to your listeners is when you start going down this path of personally attacking people, I would say before you do that, try to look in their heart and try to see if you can find goodness in their heart. Because if you believe that we're all made in the image of God, then that's what you would do. So yes, we're in all these places. We'd love for you to join. We'd love for you to become this army, this volunteer army. We don't take big money. You want to throw some money, say, hey, I can't volunteer, but I'm happy to help. The amazing part about this, I got to tell you, Brian. We actually someone sent us a $5,000 check. We sent it back. We said we don't take big money. It's all of our donations are 50, 100, this, that. It's more a commitment to the cause. Mm-hmm. But I start looking at some of these things. I look at every one of them, by the way. There's so many retired people. And I told Renee, these are the people who remember. They remember our founding fathers. They remember World War II. They remembered what so many of our kids died for. And they just say, we don't recognize what's going on. We know something's wrong. And they know it, and that's why they're so involved. Now, the younger generation, that's all they've seen, and that's the sad part. I made a comment the other day. I said, there's a large part of this generation, the younger generation, that actually believes their rights come from government. I'll give you a quick short story on the stand that happened. I played my own lawyer at this thing, which was... No,
you didn't play one on TV. You were your own lawyer.
Yeah, I was F. Lee Bailey, my own guy. So I asked this guy, this young, arrogant little kid from the agency who was sitting there on cross. I said, how he does this and how it's their right to do that. I said, are you familiar with the Constitution? And they, of course, said, objection, not relevant. So the judge said, well, where are you going with this? I said, I narrowed it down. I said, can you tell me the Declaration of Independence? And he couldn't. And the judge says, oh, tell me again where you're going. I said, I'm getting there, Your Honor. I said, okay, I'm going to start it for you. We are endowed by our Creator. Finish it. He couldn't finish it. And I said, Your Honor, this is the point I'm making. There's this entire group here, these unelected bureaucrats and agencies who believe our rights and our freedom come from them. I believe our rights and our freedom come from God. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. It's so simple. So.
What did they say?
They just.
There
was this person, a friend of ours is actually an attorney, and she was sitting in the audience. She said, that had to be my top 10 moments in my life. She said, I've never seen that. I've been to murder trials. I've been to all these things. I've never seen someone say, can you recite the Declaration of Independence? And then actually start it for them, and they're like this, and then you make the point. She said, I don't see that. I said, that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do as citizens, by the way. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to show that citizens can stand up and fight. And we need to fight. We need to fight for our rights. They're being taken away from us, and we can complain about it, or we can fight to take them back. And that's what I wanted, and that's the point I was trying to make.
Amen to that. And I want to thank you,
Thank you.